I put together, I thought, a beautifully made movie, and we were forced to cut stuff out in order to get an R rating. And I was enraged about it, because, I had the impression that because it was so effective, I was being penalized by being effective not because I showed so much, but because it was so scary and so violent.
They came out and said, "Oh, I don't think so. You're not going to be getting an R rating for this. It's going to look like an X unless you change this and this and this and this."
The problem was when the film was threatened with an X rating by the ratings board is that a lot of newspapers across the country will not run ads for an X-rated film. Same thing with theater chains. There are whole chains of theaters that will not run a film that is X-rated in their theaters. So that economically it's disastrous to have a film be rated X. It means your revenue is going to be a tiny fraction. That was attempted to be dealt with by creating the NC-17 rating. That's not been very effective either because frankly a lot of the same newspapers and theater chains that wouldn't play X-rated films or have ads for X-rated films now won't play NC-17 films.
There were some things in the opening in the shower. And then the elevator scene. So you really think Autotron's going up?
Well, I got it from a very good source.
We also lost my dialogue. I had to dub my dialogue in the scene with Michael Caine and change a few words there, referring to the bulge in his pants.
Because of the size of that cock in your pants. I don't think you're so married. Well, because of the size of that bulge in your pants.
And then as I was slashed at the end,
it was really a negotiation process. First, they suggest in broad terms the sex, the language.
I can see the bulge in his pants.
If you take out a little bit and resubmit it, if they don't want to accept what you have done, they will then get a little more specific in what they might think would help you get the cachet that you're looking for. And then it goes back into the editing room.
I've been involved in quite a few films that were controversial that way. I was associated with the first film where fuck was used in a major studio movie. That movie was called MASH. Waldo Salt was my client. He wrote Midnight Cowboy. That was an X, but in a different context in those days. Those were both very, controversial pictures that broke the barriers,
If I were the director and this was my image, I would want to put what I had in mind up there, right or wrong. I think that's probably how Brian feels, Screw him, I want to do this, this is what I want, this is my piece of art. And I can understand that.
In any event, I was enraged, and I went to the press and, just vented my unhappiness with what I was forced to do. Fortunately, we kept all the cuts in the European version, so that was my way to say, well, at least a version exists where everything is in it.
Rusty Kill pushed buttons for a lot of feminists at the time. Brian's always flirted with that by having violence and women in his films and sex and violence intertwined. I mean, he is pushing a lot of buttons for people and raising issues that people are uncomfortable with. But I think it's simplistic to say the least to just dismiss him as somebody who, thinks sex is bad. His psychology of his movies is, I think, far more complicated, interesting, grown-up, and challenging than that.
it was attacked by women's groups before the movie opened, before anyone really saw the movie. It was all about, rumor and controversy and all of that, which actually worked. It actually helped the movie.
It was terrible because you get attacked as a misogynist and somebody that's presenting a movie that's violence against women, and you get into these horrendous roundtables in these press junkets, and interviewers coming after you. And, you know, it's like beating your wife. I mean, there's no way to just come off whatever you say. They print, you know, these sort of profiles where you come off as this, you know, woman-hating misogynist, which is never how I felt about the way I made these movies. I always said endlessly that women protagonists in suspense movies work for me better because A, I like to photograph women more than men, and B, a woman in peril is, to me, more emotionally effective than Rambo in peril, you know? So it's just a simple sort of convention of the genre, and of course I said it over and over and over again. And so you basically had to live through it. It was a political period, you know, and you got branded a certain way, and that was it.
I got questioned about it. They said, don't you think you were exploited? And I said, use another word. Don't use the word exploit. What do you mean by exploit? I said, it's a story of a woman who was vulnerable and aroused and went off with somebody and got killed. I didn't look at it as punishment. I regarded it as stupid.
In my opinion, I felt that that character of Liz Blake, she's her own person. I mean, maybe she has, I mean, we all have some psychological problems. Maybe she would have found a different journey other than being a call girl, but this is a woman who wanted to be her own person. And I liked that character. I felt that she was a very modern woman.
He was telling a very specific story about very specific people, and those were the characters. He was true to those characters. The people who don't want stories told about those characters are in a way kind of abusive to the creative process because they're dictating and censoring what people should do. I mean, they were trivializing the creative process, and I think their point of view is trivial.
Brian got pretty amazing reviews from most of the important critics, but there were a lot of people who did criticize him and say, oh, you know, it's a Hitchcock ripoff.
I was always very open about my use of Hitchcock's language when I made movies and his story ideas. I mean, they're the best that exist. If you're working in this genre, Hitchcock's done it all. So if you're going to be good, you're going to use some of his ideas because he's done them all. But once I got labeled as the Hitchcock imitator, I mean, every movie somebody had to draw some reference to Hitchcock in my work, which was usually wrong. So it was always a very difficult time for me because it's, again, you're in a very defensive mode and, you know, you never come off particularly well.
I think the Hitchcock thing comes up because they both have dealt with suspense films a lot. You know, when Psycho came out, it was a very controversial film. As some of Brian's films have been dismissed as trashy and sexist and too violent, when Frenzy came out, it was dismissed as trashy and violent. You know, a lot of the same knocks on Brian now are knocks that Hitchcock did endure. And they did have that similarity in that they both were pushing the limits in the genre of suspense films in terms of violence, sexuality, and all that. Certainly they were doing some parallel things in their times. That doesn't mean they're making the same film.
All those movies that they were trashing in the 60s and the 70s or 80s are the ones that people are writing about now and the ones that seem to have some kind of life. The revisionism will start, basically. And you basically, as an artist, you just have to just do what you feel is what you're doing and not get crushed by the particular establishments in place at the time. I'm 60 now, and I'm still making movies. I'm still having ideas, and I thank God that that can still happen.